Thank you so much for the honor and for your invitation to participate in this day in your lives. I am so touched by the call to speak at this celebration of your achievements, of all your hard work, of all those unique paths, responsibilities, and decisions that you have taken and taken on to complete your Brown degree, but also to do so much more. I extend the very sincerest congratulations to all of you, and I hope that you will join me in applauding you. I do not know how to commence this speech, except by recommencing with the word that I received from you, and that is an invitation to speak. And in being invited to speak, I felt and continue to feel an immense, immeasurable responsibility. Since I heard from you, I have been asking where I could even begin to respond to all of you, whether we will have met before or whether we meet now for the first and only time. How would it be possible to speak in general to a situation that would instead, I believe, require each and every one of you to be addressed in an utterly singular way, in response to your utterly incommensurable stories, and in mindfulness of our differences? A general response would hardly be sufficient, because even if it could be made to seem situation appropriate, it may still not be a way of speaking and responding to you, but would risk speaking to someone who is not here, to some fiction perhaps of a general addressee. But this is not, and not only, the annual Midyear Completion Ceremony, it is each of yours. Which returns me to my initial question, what can I say in response to you? And what speech does our situation call for? Rather than pretending that I have the answer or that it is in my power to even give something close to an adequate response, I would like to take these questions as a sort of common ground and as a point of departure in speaking with you. As someone who decided to spend day and night thinking, reading, speaking, and writing about what language allows, and not only under the auspices of a literature department known as German Studies at Brown, but also in office hours, advising hours, politics, and friendships, I believe that nothing could be more urgent than the question of what speaking and listening entails, even and especially when it is not certain what is demanded in a singular situation, even and especially when it is not certain how to respond. But in speaking this way, I am also speaking, I hope, to your tremendous achievements. For each of you, each in a different way and under different circumstances, will have arrived here today by giving your voice in and beyond the classroom, by raising urgent questions, by expressing protest, by answering both the challenges that you sought as well as the challenges that found you along the way. And let me also say before I go on that it is humbling to share the stage with two stellar musicians. And I am thankful for this because it also reminds me to make explicit that when I refer to language, to speaking and answering, I mean all of these things in the very broadest sense. Their expression could take place through words, music, gestures, drawings, glances, pauses, or silences, through whatever it is that carries your voice and that lets your reticence resound. So one more time, how to respond. And again, what is called for in speaking. In asking these questions, I am reminded of two passages from a novel by Maurice Blanchot that has shaped what I feel I can say about them more than I have the ability to say on my own, and that revolve, I think, around the demands of an encounter. Both of the passages that I'm about to cite come from a minimal dialogue between two figures who are addressing an urgent need for speaking. The first passage speaks to the risks of speaking. When one speaker reaches out, the words miss their addressee, or so it would seem, since it is said, "You do not speak to me, you speak to someone who is not here to hear you." And the second passage speaks to the demand that another speak nonetheless beyond what is known to be possible. It goes like this. Yes, speak to me now. I cannot. Speak without the ability to do so. You so calmly ask me to do the impossible. These two passages may seem to be very remote from the situation that we are celebrating here. At least there was a joke. But I do believe that this brief dialogue from Blanchot's story marks a very important pause in dialogue and through dialogue that speaks to the often unspoken conditions for an intervention, be it in a classroom discussion, a private conversation, or a public debate, whenever learning, deliberation, or simply encountering another is truly in question. And that means whenever the outcome and even the direction and the participants in a dialogue are not predetermined or decided in advance. And let me pause to thank Maïta for this inspiring word of a pause. Blanchot's dialogue marks an outspoken pause where no prior script or prior knowledge would seem to suffice. The want for words is why there is a most urgent need to speak. And when this happens, risks are run, speaking seems impossible, and the speakers place themselves at stake. But as we see, a response is given, the impossible is done, and the dialogue goes on. Because even the seemingly negative answers in the dialogue that I just quoted, I cannot speak, you ask me to do the impossible, these are spoken answers. If speaking can still be called impossible, then impossible cannot refer to something that does not happen. The speaker does what is said to be impossible to do as she speaks. The impossible would have to refer to what exceeds anything that the speakers may already know to be possible, take for granted, or assume to be in their power. Speaking and responding can take us outside of that realm of possibility, I believe, and into the impossible, into a situation where radical uncertainty and responsibility coincide, but where, for that very reason, what was known to be possible before, or what was simply assumed to be, can be exceeded, for better and also sometimes for worse. Yet as you will have shown with your words of protest, but also with your most urgent questions and interventions over the past years, the uncertainties that accompany all that can be said are also what allow for the most seemingly certain assumptions and the most authoritative demands to be unsettled, since there could be no demands of authority, there could be no dogmatic, oppressive claims if there were not a moment of speaking. And that means if there were not a moment where all involved rely upon at least one thing that is not in anyone's power, even if it were to be abused for the purpose of gaining power. There would be no demands of authority and no dogmatic claims, that is to say, if there were not a moment where all involved rely upon the language that they are speaking, which they did not invent, which is other than they, and which comes before anyone can even say you or I, let alone make a demand or establish a claim. This is what it would mean, I think, to speak without the ability to do so, as Blanchot had said. Language does not come, first of all, from us, from our power or ability alone. It comes to us and it goes beyond us, thanks to others. And it is the fact that everyone speaks without the ability to do so, in this very specific sense, that makes, in principle, every claim to certitude open to question, that in principle renders all data a question of interpretation and truth an infinite task, and that in principle speaks against every assertion of privilege from within it. There may persist the possibility that speakers fail to speak to one another, or worse, that someone is refused the possibility to speak. Yet when speaking comes to happen through whatever avenue, then what happens next opens up, however minimally. Then there may be situations where the parameters of possibility as we know it can be explicitly called into question, where the status quo may be explicitly shown to be unsettled, as it really is, and where the orders and assumptions that once demanded to be imposed without question can explicitly be exposed themselves as uncertain and as questionable as they really are, because they are utterly reliant upon what no one, even someone in power, has the power to own, namely, the words that are spoken. What I am describing with the help of Blanchot, with the emphasis upon risk, uncertainty, and impossibility, may sound negative, but I hope that it is already becoming clear that the uncertainty, the not knowing in advance that comes along with each situation that demands and allows for a response is precisely what also gives the greatest hope, because it may hold open the space for an encounter, for a game-changing intervention or improvisation. And here I thank you, Warner, for this inspiring word. This uncertainty, this not knowing in advance, not only involves immense vulnerability. In the best of situations, and by this I mean those situations where speaking can take place among others as others in a dialogue that is not already decided. It also lets those who speak, along with the situation itself, to be questions to one another and to themselves. And beyond that, even in less hospitable situations, the uncertainties that accompany speaking may nonetheless entail the possibility that something will happen in speaking to another, with another, in that something of what is said will have spoken in a way that remains beyond even the one who may have happened to say it, and that something will therefore take place that goes beyond what anyone could have hoped for, and for the better. At a later moment in the same novel by Blanchot that I have been quoting, this possibility is addressed when the figure who has so insistently been asking another to speak says, "Perhaps you will only speak to me unaware that you are doing so." You never know when a word, a note, a gesture, or a silence is going to mean something to another in advance. This is impossible. But just as you never know whether or how your speaking will reach another, you also never know when you will speak in a way that will make a radical difference. This is the other side of the coincidence of responsibility and uncertainty that I have been speaking about. And it is all the more reason to keep allowing for your situation to speak and to keep trying to speak to it. But another way to put what I'm saying is to say that in speaking with one another and in responding to a situation that exceeds what we know ourselves to be able to do or to say, and this means in responding to a situation that goes beyond what is possible as we know it, we might do the impossible and open up to another future than any that could have been foreseen at present. Now, in saying these things, I do not believe that I am telling you anything new. I am trying to speak, still in a far too general way, in praise of what you will have said and done here and beyond. Because you will have done the impossible every time you spoke for what is at stake for you, with all of the uncertainties and risks that that responsibility entails. But let me cite some examples that are more specific to this situation. At some point several years ago, you will have all gotten the call or the letter to come here to pursue your studies under the auspices of the open curriculum, whose principles say nothing of earning high grades, nothing of mastering bodies of knowledge or techniques, nothing of following a particular course of study, and nothing of preparing for a certain post-graduation plan. The first principle reads, I quote, that students ought to take an active role in their education by assuming responsibility for the direction of their learning. And before any particular direction of your learning was adopted here, you will have entered this space without the possibility of knowing what you were getting into. It's true. Me too. Without the possibility of knowing what you would learn, without the possibility of knowing whom you would speak with as you learned it, and without the possibility of knowing how your responses to professors and peers and others, as well as their responses to you, would shape that experience. The first responsibility that you undertook, that is to say, began by responding with acceptance to the uncertainty over what each situation would mean and demand of you. And you answered. You entered into dialogue with it, the impossible. As point fivers, you will have paused, improvised, and responded to the unique and unanticipatable circumstances that called upon you between then and now, and you did it, the impossible. And upon this day of celebrating the completion of your Brown degree, you will have already said yes to the future, which can only be a future insofar as it is not already scripted, prescribed, and known in advance. And you will have done it again, the impossible. If I had to leave off these remarks with a word of advice, I would say, keep giving your voice. Keep attending and responding to the urgent need for speaking in the way that has brought you where you are. It is my hope that you will go on speaking and asking questions that open possibilities for further speaking. That you will go on speaking out and holding out for nothing less than the impossible, because that is what we have to go on and is what we have to go on. I hope for the unknown futures that I know you will make possible when you give your word. Thank you.